I'm Darlene Hanson, and I'm welcoming you to our DVU Communication Access Connect this month. This month, um, first I'll introduce everybody else. I'm the trainer for self-advocates and here at DVU, and I'm being joined by another member of my team, which is William. You want to introduce yourself, William?
Hello, my name is William Del Rosario, and I am a Hispanic Filipino male in my 20s with short black hair, brown eyes, and I wear glasses. I'm an intern with DVU and a multimodal communicator who uses augmentative and alternative communication, or AAC, via typing and my iPad. Thank you for making the time to be here.
Thanks, William. All right, and then today we're going to be joined by Vivian, who is our supported decision making coordinator, director, grant designee. So Vivian, I'll let you introduce yourself real quick.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Vivian. I'm our project manager for our supported decision-making training and information center. So excited to be bringing you all more information about supported decision-making today.
All right, great. And then we also have, and Shirley is in her car driving to her next destination, but I invited Shirley Gaw to Shirley, you want me to talk for you since you're driving? It makes me nervous to switch around. Um, Shirley's going to be, when she gets her destination, she'll be talking to us and joining into this conversation, just as you all can join into this conversation. Okay? Shirley's a mom of two kids, and one of her kids, her daughter, is a 16-year-old who is an AAC user and has some speech and language skills. And they're starting to hear things about conservatorship and supported decision making. So I thought she would be a good person to join us and help us think about what is it that we know about supported decision making, or maybe what do we need to continue to think about when we're helping advocate for that. So let's get started. Today we talked a couple months ago about supported decision making, and Vivian did a presentation on supported decision making for us. But as a speech and language pathologist and as a DVU member, I often hear people talking about, what about my child? What about the individual I work with? I don't know that they can answer these questions or make these decisions. And when I hear those kinds of questions, I think we need more clarification on how exactly do we support individuals with communication challenges and differences. So that's what I wanted us to kind of work through today. And hopefully, if that's who you are and why you're here, you're going to get some more ideas about how to prepare and advocate at the same time. Okay? So we're going to get started as usual. You can put your questions into the chat, and we'll kind of watch that going along and interrupt ourselves if it's appropriate. Otherwise, we'll keep going and keep answering them at the end of the conversation here. So let's get started, Vivian.
Sounds good. And as I launch the slides, I'm also going to launch a pre-training survey. We're doing this training as a part of a grant that DVU has gotten from the State Council of Developmental Disabilities. And so we want to track how much you're learning throughout these trainings as well. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the pre-training survey as well.
Great. Okay, so today we titled it Supported Decision Making in and or just say in, but that's what it says, with the complex communicator. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about today.
So again, just to break down what we'll be going over today, it will be all about building your team, talking about nonverbal communication, building a communication system, how to prepare for SEM through education, and then finally advocating for SEM through different avenues as well. So as we get started, I just wanted to provide a brief introduction to supported decision making again, in case you weren't able to attend our last Communication Access Connect. So what is supported decision making? Supported decision making is an alternative to conservatorship, and it's a way for supporters to be able to help individual with a disability to help them make their decisions, to help them understand, consider, and communicate what their choices and preferences and decisions are. Unlike conservatorship, this is designed to change as life changes. There's no need to go through a court process. You can practice it informally, and if you want to make it more formal, you can create supported decision making agreements that are notarized as well. But again, it's a process that allows people with disabilities to be able to choose their supporters to help them make choices to their capabilities as well.
So as many people, myself included, sometimes, but for sure, many people who have complex communication needs need people around them to support their communication in some fashion, or to support their autonomy, or to support them being heard, their self-advocacy. We need a team of people. So we're going to talk about who is that team and where do they come from. Um, that's going to be our first conversation. So when I say a team, it means that you as an individual are not going to necessarily be out there on your own, advocating all on your own for your major purchases, or for your medical treatments, or for your housing, or for your IPP or your IEP meetings. That's not what we're talking about in supported decision making. The key word is supported. And so, who are these people that support you? How do you get this support? So I broke down a few ideas here. Um, it's a circle of support, and everybody. It's not like you have to have one person in each of these spots. It's you as a person. Think about who gets me. Okay, you as a family, who gets my son or my daughter? Who are the people that um, I trust, right? And so these might be professionals. It might be that you're an AAC user and you have a speech and language pathologist that you trust, and or you have an AT person that you trust, and that is always looking out for your advocacy and your ability to be heard. That might be a key professional. It might be a social worker person that's in your life, or a Department of Rehab person that's in your life, or even a support person themselves, like on your team. You know, you might have support that comes into your home or into your life, and it's a professional person, but they act and they are accepted as more than just a paid professional. They're part of your life and they get you. So that's a key professional. Um, of course, think about family members. You know, this can be your parents, of course, but it could be an aunt or an uncle or a brother or a sister. Um, Again, who understands what you as an individual, or what your son or daughter wants to have as elements within their life. You know, that I when I work with families, sometimes there's siblings who aren't very connected to the vision, or even professionals who aren't very connected to the vision of a person's life and what they've been building. And if that's the case, then that person might not be the best advocate for you at this point. They might need to have some more training themselves, even. But anybody in that understands you can be your team member. Or it might be a peer. It might be somebody that you met in high school. It might be somebody that you have around at church, in a church group. It's not, you don't want it to be a stranger. It's not just, oh, I see you once a week and would you be on my team, my support team here? It's somebody that you really connect with. So that's the team that you want to build, so that you have this support. And we'll talk more about what you do with this team as well in a few minutes here. But let's go to the next slide.
Yeah, so what is the role of the support person? These people help you understand your choices, the choices you're making, all the options that you have, and they help you understand them, as well as help you communicate all your choices and decisions, as well as your preferences. Unlike conservatorship, where there's only one person who's there to make all the decisions for you, here you're surrounded by a circle of support of all the different people that Darlene had just mentioned, and they're there to support you in this process. And so, what are some ways and what are some things a support person can do? A big thing is having regular team meetings, to have regular check ins with the person you're supporting, to discuss progress, address different issues, challenges, talking about how and what type of support you want and in what areas of your life you want support, right? Because how much you want support, how much you need support, and in what areas can change over time as you build capacity, as you gain skills, and as you learn. Those things are always changing, right? Maybe right now you need more help in your day to day life, whether that's through picking what you need to eat, what you're going to do for the day, what your schedule is. But maybe later on that changes and you need less support in those areas. So it's important to have regular team meetings with your support team so that they can understand what your needs are and they can understand how they can best support you as well. Thinking about what skills are great to have in a support person: advocacy skills, listening skills, being responsive and resourceful. Really, again, going off of what Darlene said, these people really understand you. They understand how you communicate, and we'll get into different types of communication in just a moment. But they really understand how you communicate, what your preferences are. Other skills to think about is maybe you have a family member you're really close with, and they also work in the healthcare field. That's a great person to have to be supporting you with healthcare decisions, right? Other things can be maybe you have another family friend who's a teacher and they work in education. They could be great to help you with the IEP process as well as getting resources at school as well. So think about the skills of the people around you in your life and where they're going to be most impactful, right? Each support person doesn't have to support you in all areas of your life. Um, so just think about that as you consider who you're selecting to be your support person.
Or on your team. And your team might be 5 people. It might be three, it might be 10, you know? And they don't all have to be people who do everything. You might have certain people that you turn to for financial reasons, certain people that you turn to for education needs. Um, but there's a number of people, not necessarily having to do everything, but people who understand your vision and your goals. And I think, being the communication specialist, I want to point out the you that we're talking about today is, as a complex communicator, is probably a pair. It's probably you as a communicator, and then your most, important person in your life, your parent or your sibling or your, but you together are developing this team. Okay. If you as a parent know that so and so doesn't ever get along with this other person, then they should not be invited to the team, right? um, but it might, in this profile, it might be that you as a parent or you as a sibling are the ones really, you feel like you're more in the lead, but you're still always checking in, you're always informing, and you're always bringing your individual into the story a little bit more than we would typically when we just get things done for them, right? So I want to talk about these nonverbal communicators. Um, so next slide. Okay, so nonverbal, this one, yeah. Nonverbal communicators. If you're a non-speaking person and I'm thinking in my head of the person who's non-speaking and doesn't really have a means of communication. Okay, William, you have a means of communication. You can use your AAC. You're dependent on your communication partner, but you use communication. And once you have communication, we hear you, right? But I know that there's individuals out there who, and we'll give a couple scenarios here, but who don't have a means of reliable communication in their life at this point. Now, definitely that's a goal, but you might not have anything right now. So We want to, as communication, as support people, as caring individuals, as family members, whatever your role is, you want to and acknowledge that person's strengths. Like what do you know that they really enjoy, whether it be how they enjoy spending their time or how or what they like to do, okay? Like physically can do for themselves. But what are some strengths that the person has? You want to, well, again, we can talk more about this, but I think, and I advocate for creating a communication profile. Now, this can seem overwhelming because communication is pretty complex, but if you just really think about how do you want what are all the pieces that go into communication for this individual as a support person. Like I know that my person here communicates by blinking their eyes for yes and by frowning for no. I know that. I can put that down in a communication profile. I know that when so and so starts pushing their leg really fast on the foot pedal of their wheelchair, that they're getting angry and they don't like what we're talking about. I can write that down. So there's different things that you can put into a communication profile. And I didn't pull up a communication profile link, but I can definitely do that later. Um, I don't know, Michaela, is there a way to put a link to a communication profile later for the recording or something?
Yeah, we can definitely put it in the notes on YouTube.
Okay, then that's what we'll do. So we'll drop a communication profile link in there for you that you can download, and it's just a template. You can do whatever you want for it with it, but start, and you can do it through video or you can do it through written form, but start thinking about how do I know my individual communicates and what can they communicate? That's what you put in the communication profile. Okay. You might know that your person uses visual supports. So if you give them choices visually with a picture boards or an iPad with pre-programmed communication device or writing it out as you're talking to them, whatever works, go for that. William says, I rely on my mom, but training others to be my communication partner. Right. And so William relies on his mom as his communication partner. And now he's at the step in his story where he's training more communication partners so that he can expand his life beyond his mom. Because right now he has to have his dad with him, which we're just joking because dad's a great support person, but he's learning how to do this. So William's training people now. And that is what it takes, training your communication partners. Okay. So a non-speaking person needs to have a trained communication partner. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody uses a literacy-based system like William does, but people, if you went to a new, let's say you have new staff people and they came in yesterday. Okay, they're not the people who are trained to be your communication partner. They just met you. All right. They need to get some background on who you are, background on how you communicate. That training part needs to be accepted and provided so that your person understands how your unique communication systems work. Okay. And then you might have to have some communication strategies. Like for William, it's about his support person. It might be people who understand how to use your technology. Okay. But it's complex. And that part is, but with your communication, you are communicating. So let's talk about the next slide is building. Oops, hang on. Okay. Building communication systems. Okay, hang on. I got to go to the next one. All right. So let's say you're a well, it says nonverbal, but it's supposed to be non-speaking, but that's okay. We'll switch that later in my lives here. So you might be a non-speaking person. Side note, the reason we're changing it to non-speaking is because verbal implies language, and so there are many communicators who use AAC who have language skills but don't speak. So it's now the way to talk about it is to be a non-speaking person, right? Or a limited non-speaking. Oh, great. Okay, Shirley, let's, Shirley, you can unmute yourself and jump in whenever you want to. Um, so let's look at this non-speaking, identifying communications, non-speaking persons. If you're a non-speaking individual, again, you may use your eye gaze, you may use your body tone. I've known people when their arms come straight up like this, that means no. And when they reach them out like this, it means yes. Okay. I knew that. And everybody that worked with those individuals knew that about them. That counts. That's non-speaking communication system for that individual. It's a limited system, but it is a system. Okay. Um, as opposed to a limited non-speaking person would be a person who has speech, but it's not effective. By effective, I mean it doesn't allow them to get all their needs met. Okay, so you may be able to effectively say your basic wants and needs, or engage in social banter with your family because you do these script dialogue things together, but with speech. But you can't tell a story necessarily. I mean, some people can, but if you are this person, you might not be able to tell a story about what you did today or tell a story about what you dream about for the future. Okay, so you have speech, but it's limited. All right. And then there's other people who are just flat out, everybody identifies them as AAC users. Vladimitra says, I have a daughter that relies on me and I'm trying to get her to do some communication on her own. She doesn't want to do it. She will just go along with whatever others wants. She will not say what she wants. That worries me to death. Ooh, that's a great point. And that has to do a ton with self-advocacy. You don't want to be a yes man, right? That's not a self-advocate. Um, and so I think, I don't know how old your daughter is, but that's why we want to instill self-advocacy from a very young age so that people don't get in the hang of just being a yes man, doing what everybody else wants them to do. She's 35. Okay, right. There you go. So she's got some real maturing in a sense, I guess I would say it would be. It's not a bad thing, but the reality is that she's lived a life where maybe she wasn't listened to as much as she could have been. Maybe she was told to make a different choice rather than people saying, oh, tell me more about that, right? They might say, that's not the right answer. Pick from the ones I'm giving you, right? And she might not know how to say, I don't know. And these are all important things for self-advocates to learn how to do. And just because you put them in a communication system doesn't mean they know how to do it. They don't know the power of it, especially if they're older and it's been squashed for them. So that's where the building needs to come. Right. Yep. Yeah. Okay. So this is what different kinds of communication systems that people can use. And we're going to talk about through our scenarios what that looks like, but I think you're probably all in this boat. Um, okay, let's go to the next slide. All right, so if you are building a communication, if you need to still build a communication system, if you don't have that in place yet, then now is the time to get an assessment, to get some appropriate equipment, to get some strategies for communication in place, and start developing communication as a family. I always advocate for the family first because you're always in the picture and you need to know how the person communicates. If you rely on other people to teach your person how to communicate and to be the communication partners in a sense, and then they come home and you don't know how they communicate, that's not going to go well for them or you in the future because the other people come and go. Yeah, being an independent Carrie's reminding us, being an independent communicator is so important. And that comes from people knowing how to listen to you, because you guys know you could be left out of a conversation, right? You could be ignored. All of those things could happen in any kind of conversation, and we have to help people as a family develop that. Oh, this person's going to be included. Tommy says developing communication as a family can be hard, but so important to keep that as a priority no matter how long it takes. Yep. Yeah. Shirley, you want to talk anything about your family and their how communication works in your family? Are you
So
driving,
my
Shirley? Oh, there.
no. I had
Okay.
to unmute myself. So my daughter is gonna be 16 the end of this month, and for the most part, she is, she is able to um verbalize, right? But she's considered minimal and unreliable sometimes. Like she's pretty much a yes girl too. So she'll say yes even though she doesn't want it. And as soon as you give it to her, then she's pushing it away. Then, I've had to remind her that it's okay to say no. But I guess, all these years, right, of doing ABA and getting instructed in school, mostly in special day class, that a lot of decisions have been, she hasn't been, sadly she hasn't been allowed to make her own decisions. um she was self-injurious prior, but we she's had to deal with this, and so now we're dealing with this where she has a hard time saying no now. So we have to undo a lot of things, and so here we are. But she's this past year has been really a godsend to our family, because she has been using Proloquo to go when she was younger. But it became evident the last couple years when she's been able to type, and she's not really using the picture icons effectively. She needs to be in a text-based one, although we have to like really work on getting her open. So
So she isn't a completely effective communicator. She's still building skills to
yes.
build communication and decision
Mm-hmm.
making and advocacy.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
And that's the kind of scenario that I think I would guess is concerning for families. Like, well, how would I do supported decision making if that's the case, right? So that's really why we're bringing this all together today. Okay, let's go to
Yes.
the next slide, Vivian. Oh, go ahead.
And one of my question, was, if the individual is not fully open, I mean, I know we can do this. It's our choice if we want to do supported decision making versus conservatorship. But the question is how you're going to get the people in the community to buy in, or to recognize it as an official document.
Yeah. So the good news is that we have AB 1663. So there actually is a law, or a bill rather, that you can go back to and you can say, well, no, I'm not making this up. This isn't just me. This is the state of California. And so you can, if you need to, go back to that. But I think that, I mean, I think it's important that we really focus ourselves on the messaging that we're creating for people. If, and William, I'm going to jump in here just because I know that you wouldn't be able to say all this with your dad supporting you, if that's okay. Is that all right? Yeah, okay. So if we present ourselves as a family, for example, or as a team or an agency or whoever, you group of friends, whatever, as if that person's communicating, and we're not in an imaginary way, but I'm including William in my conversations, I'm including Kaylin in my conversations, the rest of the people around us start assuming you're supposed to do that. Okay. And so that's powerful, I think. Because if you don't include the persons yourself, then other people don't just jump in and do that for you. But as we start changing the way we interact with each other, I think the rest of the world or the people in the environment that you're in will start seeing that, oh, look what's happening there. I mean, I know for you, William, that if you talk to a group of special educators, for example, in a contentious kind of a way, then they're not going to necessarily pay attention to you. But when you go and you do a presentation to a group of educators and there's a panel of you, people start talking to you, you know? So our messaging, I think, is really important. I think it's going to take time, and that's why we're doing these grants here. William says, I'm still working with my dad to become more open. Yeah, but your dad always includes you in the conversation,
Okay.
right? And so it's about how we send it out there. Yeah. So I'm seeing a question from Deborah. I'll get Deborah can ask, can you give a number of words that describe limited nonverbal? Need to know some words that describes this level of verbal communicator. Yeah, not affected, unreliable, limited communication. I mean, I don't there. Some people would say things like, oh, they're scripting or they're, using echolalia or whatever. I don't use those words because they don't really have anything to do with communication. But I would say that the person is not limited effective communication. That's how I would write it down usually. They're unreliable. If they're an unreliable person will say one thing and then communicate another thing, or they'll say yes to everything, for example, as an example. And then when you give it to them, they push it away. So clearly, they should have said no, but they don't say no. And so that would be unreliable. That means what they're saying isn't necessarily going to be effective. Okay. And then, so you want to work towards getting it effective. Like, why should they walk around being ineffective communicators, right? Okay.
I would also include that, like, for limited would be like my daughter. She'll just say, I'm happy, and she's like looking like she's crying, or if we get her to even admit to that she's sad, but she can't really express why. So it's
Right.
very limiting.
Yeah. Going into the real story, the whole story. Right. Yeah. That's a good example as well. Okay. Let's do the next slide.
Yeah, so now we have just kind of a scenario. So in this scenario, we're going to talk through all the parts that we mentioned earlier. So in this scenario, the individual has no speech, very low arousal level, and limited to no AAC system. So we're going to talk about how we build out a supported decision-making team here and how we use supported decision-making here because it's still very valuable as an alternative to a conservatorship. And just we'll mention this more later, but again, it still promotes individual rights, dignity, and allows them to participate in their own decisions about their life to the fullest extent possible. And just having that participation in their own life is very empowering, very motivating as well. So for this scenario, let's first talk about team composition. We talked a lot about what types of people should be a part of your support team. And so here we've broken down an example for this scenario. Some great people to be included on this team as family members. Again, people who know their routine very well, know their expressions, right? Knowing that, like Darlene was saying, thumping with their left leg means one meaning, right? Or shaking their head or blinking in a certain way means that. Any type of communication, gesture, or facial expressions, family members that are involved in their daily lives are able to know that really well. They also know what their routines are and what other nonverbal cues are very intimately. Other great people to include are teachers or therapists. Again, professionals that are really, they really understand what their educational needs are, what their therapeutics needs are. Also want to Also what their capabilities are, how they respond to different scenarios, and are around them in a different setting as well, right? Whether that's in the school setting, as well. Other people to include could be a case manager or a care coordinator, just because these people often oversee and integrate different aspects of the care, right? A big part of a communication system is it's not just one person, it's multiple people communicating with each other on different types of decisions, right? The overlap between education and healthcare. And so a case manager would be a great person to include in this team as well, just because they're overseeing multiple aspects of their life. Other cases can also include an advocate or a legal representative who really knows disability rights, to ensure that their individual rights are being upheld. And this can include giving them guidance on supported decision making as well. Um, like Shirley had mentioned earlier, how do we get these professionals to buy into this, right? These advocates can be someone, it can be telling them about the AB 1663 law, right? Telling them that this is an alternative to conservatorships. And this is how I want to make decisions with the support of these people. And that includes having these people at meetings with me to help me make those decisions. And a big thing too is a communication specialists, whether it's your communication partner, like Darlene mentioned earlier, people who are really in tune with how you want to communicate and help them out. Whether that's helping interpret subtle cues, helping them maybe use their their choice board, their letter board, or assisting them in typing and really helping facilitate others really understand their preferences, their discomforts, and what their wants are.
Yeah. So your team can be expansive. Am I going to do this next one, Vivian?
Yes.
Okay. So what do you do with this team? Hang on. Am I on the wrong slide? What am I? Okay. You want to, I know I'm not Bill. I'm totally out of sync here. 1 second. Sorry, guys. Let me see where I am. I feel like I'm not in the right spot.
We're on 14 right now.
I know. Okay. All right. I had something else prepared in my head to say. So sorry. I was jumping ahead or something. Okay. So you all, as team members on the supported decision-making team, are there to observe and to interpret, and to make the adjustments, okay? And help with these routine decisions and these big decisions. So I'm going to give an example of an individual, that a scenario that came up in my own life with for a friend, and he is a hearing impaired man, and he worked a job at the school district, and he was on the grounds crew, and has a family. It's my age, and we had to, and he was definitely an individual with a disability who was included in his community and always had been as a his whole life. But when he ended up at one point in some health issues that ended up into some mental health kind of issues, and all of us, it all first started with his people at work. His friends at work connected with his family to say something's going on, because they observed that he was not as effective of a worker as he had been. Okay. And so then team meetings happened. They brought in an interpreter, but the interpreter was just interpreting and wasn't checking to see if he understood what they were saying, and he wasn't. So then I came in to be his personal interpreter so that I could make it so make sure he understood what was happening. But we had to change the environment. We had to change. We had to make sure he understood everything. And I know he's not necessarily the person that I'm describing in this scenario being low arousal, but my point is we came together and made all these adjustments for him as a team so that he could understand as as much as he could about what was happening and what kind of help he needed, and we could offer him. um, and so that's what you would do as working with the person in this scenario who has limited communication and is a very complex communicator, is you're including the individual and you're including them and because you know the person, right? You observe how they interact. You interpret their body language. You advocate for more communication, of course, but you express what you know about the needs of the environment, what you know about the needs of their routines, about what you know about their prior knowledge. Okay, you're a spokesperson in a sense, but you're including the person. Okay, that's the big deal. It's not you went to the meeting for them. Don't do that. You're including the person. Okay, and you're modeling that. And if the person's name is Sally, you're saying, so Sally, you look like you don't like what we're talking about right now. Let's back it up here. And then you advocate that we should probably back it up. Maybe we should call the meeting. Maybe the person's too stressed. You step up and you acknowledge what you see out of the person's nonverbal communication, if that's what you know about how they communicate. Okay. That is supported decision making. All right. Um, and we'll talk about the legal parts of it later, but that is how the team functions in making sure that the individual gets to be included. Okay, now we'll go to the next slide.
So now talking about how we would use the decision-making process in this scenario. So a big thing we talk about is consensus among team members, but this also still having us to remember that the individual, the self-advocate, is the one in the driver's seat of all these issues, right? Consensus among team members happens when we sit down and we all verbalize it, where we all talk about these different issues, right? We understand the pros and cons in the different situations. We're explaining it to them in a way that they understand, and building off of what Darlene is saying, we are including the individual in this process, in understanding and communicating what their fears may be, what their hesitations might be, or what they're feeling about the process in general. A big thing also is documentation, right? Documenting how they might feel about this situation, how they are communicating discomfort, how are they communicating different things, and having that documented as well. So one of these examples can be you're going to a doctor's office and you're noticing that there's a fear of maybe needles, and they are they're showing their discomfort by continually hitting something, right? That is how they're showing that they're discomfort. It's great to document that. So now you can put it into the communication profile. You can put it in, we'll talk about it later, a healthcare passport, so that when you go to these healthcare settings, you understand how they're going to show their discomfort. You're going to show how they understand when something is going on. And so that also helps out different professionals that they're going to have to interact with, understand how they're going to communicate what they're feeling about a certain scenario as well. And then in the same vein as having that documentation, it's important to review it. How we communicate and how we express different things changes over time, right? And as a person on their support team, it's our job to really watch out and really understand how those changes happen over time, and to review it and to continue to document it so others can understand how they're communicating their preferences in these areas.
Yeah, perfect, perfect.
So I have a question.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure since supported decision making is backed by an assembly bill, there must be some, like the minimum documents, right? Documentation, like, maybe like a once a year or once every quarter team meeting, things like that. And, are those in the bill, or, and like, who do you, for like record keeping purposes, I'm guessing there's probably a designated recorder to
Stop digging
keep
my
the
bag.
minutes of the meeting,
Get out of my bag.
and things like that. And then, is it subject to audit?
No, so with supported decision making in that bill, there's really multiple ways you can go about it. You can go about it very informally, right? A lot of us practice supported decision decision making very informally, whether that's I'm going to consult my dad on a healthcare decision I'm going to make, right? And I want to involve him very informally. And that's something that we can do as well. You don't need any documentation or anything like that to practice supported decision making. In the law, you're able to, if they want a supporter there with them at a doctor's office, at an IPP meeting, at an IEP meeting, they have the legal right to bring a support person or support people in with them in these meetings. If you do want to practice it formally, that includes creating a supported decision-making agreement. And we'll add links to a template of one at the end. And if you do want to go down that route, then there's more requirements, right? But it's not required to go through this formal process. And the formal process is it's a form that you fill out. Who is the supporter? Does the supporter meet these requirements? Which things include like they don't have a conflict of interest in their care. They haven't been prosecuted for abuse and things like that. And it outlines out where and how this person is going to give them support. And in AB 1663, it's recommended that it is reviewed at least every 2 years. But again, that's only if you want to practice it very formally. But just because it's reviewed every 2 years, it can be reviewed at any time and it can be changed at any time. These documents for supported decision-making agreements, you can either have it notarized or you can have other individuals that aren't their supporters act as witnesses in signing it as well. So it can constantly be changed whenever you feel like it needs to be reviewed. If you're practicing it formally, the law does recommend at least every 2 years it's reevaluated.
Okay. And what's the minimum age to have supported decision making?
So supported decision making begins at any age. Everyone is practicing it. When we're talking about it as an alternative to conservatorship, then that's when it becomes, this is after 18, right? But you are practicing it every day. And the goal is to begin practicing it as early as possible, to
Right.
encourage them to build their support team, to know who are the people that they can rely on to talk about these decisions. But when we're talking about it in the sense that it is an alternative to conservatorship, it begins after they're 18.
Oops. Shirley, you're muted somehow.
So if you want it to be the alternative towards conservatorship, then do you have to practice it formally, like what you said, or still you could do it informally?
You can still do it informally.
Oh, okay. I see.
The only time a supported decision-making agreement is required is if you already have a conservatorship and you are petitioning to remove the conservatorship is the only time you need to have that formal documentation.
Oh, okay. I
Okay.
see. It seems so easy.
It
I
is.
mean, it's almost like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And I heard about it years ago. We came from Nevada, and I remember my educational advocate, who's also a parent, but her daughter was already in her early to mid 20s, and she mentioned to me that she didn't do a conservatorship, but at that time, it was still too far away for my daughter, so I wasn't really paying attention. But now, you really got my attention because, I have to make a decision, and a lot of parents in my situation where, like we're already stressing now, oh, we need to do conservatorship, but it's not really, we don't have to go that route. So, yeah.
You
So
do
I'm
not.
thankful.
You
Mhm.
do not. So let's see. We had a conversation here, and Vladimitra said, my daughter's working with the Institute of Effective Education for Self-Advocacy. I don't know them, but okay. But they told me she was enjoying it. That same day, she was with me in tears, saying it was too much. I asked them what person was they were talking about because it was not my daughter. I'm not included in this training at all. The reason is that they are trying to get her to do things on her own. And that mentality, I'll call it mentality, that view that everybody needs to do everything on their own is it's kind of ableist, right? I mean, I get that we want, I'm not going to talk about this next, promoting autonomy. You want to promote autonomy, but to be an advocate on your own means you need to have listeners, right? And so as a group, we learn to be better listeners. And so that is, I think, just as important. I mean, learning self-advocacy skills is important, but but you have to have your people understanding, otherwise people will squash it. If I was to walk around and say to an individual, I'm going to listen to every word you say, and I value you, and I'm going to acknowledge everything you talk about, and then the next person and the rest of the team that they work with on a daily basis doesn't do that, that's not promoting advocacy. Advocacy and autonomy is an internal feeling. It's a feeling of pride, it's a feeling of confidence, and it's a feeling of sureness that you can take that risk. That doesn't come from hanging out or working with individuals who would squash that on a daily basis. So I always say to people, what you practice, you learn. And so if you learn in class about being a self-advocate, and then you go outside of class and people are not using the same philosophies and skill buildings and strategies, it's going to get squashed again. So I mean, that's not something I would promote, to learn in isolation how to self-advocate, because you need to do it all day long. And then Jane said, I'll get a few questions out here. Jane said, how do you make SDM binding? It doesn't have to be binding, but if you want to make it binding, that's what Vivian's talking about. There are forms, and we'll get to those at the end, that you can use. And then she said, and what happens when there are gaps of providers on your team? Well, if your team, it's not a paid team, it's a support team. So if you have 6 people in your life that support your communication, support your autonomy, and support you as an individual to be all that you can be, then one person leaves, you still got 5, and then you get another one. Okay, so don't think of it as like an employee situation. That's not what it is. You might have people who are employees on your team because you've really connected and they're your friends, and they understand you and advocate for you, but that's not how the team gets evolved. Okay, the team is a combination of all kinds of people. It might be a pastor, it might be a person that works with you, it might be a sibling, it might be a friend, it might be a friend's mother or father. Okay, it doesn't have to be an employee. So the gaps are different in that you build a team that has quite a few people on it, and then if one person leaves, one person leaves, and when you find someone that you want to invite into the group, you invite them into the group and you build it up again. There's no rules about it. Kathy says, how are they protected under the laws under SDM? Well, you're protected by the fact that you can practice SDM. I don't know, I'm not sure, Kathy, what other kind of protection you were thinking you were looking at, but the protection is that you can advocate through your support team or for yourself, either way, through supported decision making. And the protection and the rule is that we have AB 1663 that allows you to do that. But we'll talk about some more of the legal stuff, because I know that there's lots of big questions that come up. Alvar says, if in a transition program through school between 18 to 21, the school might want an official SDM document to still work with the parents, but that depends on the school. And they might, and you might want to do that just for the sake of conversation and just say, okay, fine, here it is. You don't have to, but you might want to, okay? Maribel says, 1663 is a law that aims to reduce the use of conservatorship for people with disabilities. It also provides alternatives to conservatorship, such as supported decision making. What AB 1663 does recognizes supported decision making, allows people with disabilities to get support from people they trust without losing their rights. That's right. So the why you would want to do it is you're promoting autonomy. The person that's the center of this team is the person that's the center of this team. People aren't going to meetings without you. and discussing your life, and then telling you when they get home how it's going to be. Okay, you're the person. And even if you have a very, very small, limited means of communication, you can be autonomous with your support team, helping you and advocating for you and what they know that you like and value in your world. It also allows you flexibility. You could change it up. You could change the people that are involved. You could change your spending plan. You could change your I mean, personally, not just set in an SDP way, but just, how you want to save more money. You might say, hey, I am saving to go on a trip, on a cruise to Mexico. And then you might, so, okay, fine, we're doing that. And then you might say, you know what, I don't think I feel like getting on a ship these days. Instead, I want to go to Palm Springs. Okay, you can do that. Okay, there's flexibility. There's flexibility in people who are supporting you. You might outgrow some members of your team. You might say, this person doesn't understand how important this thing is to me anymore. And so you can change the dynamics of the team by doing that. And you as a team, for the person who's very involved in limited communication here, you can be advocating accordingly as well. You're speaking as a group. Okay, you're coming to a consensus. This whole the idea of STM is it's less invasive. You're going to be and picking the people that work with you, and by you again I mean family and or consumer at this point, or communicator. But you're not at the, I'm going to say mercy, but I don't know, that's not a nice word, but you don't have to rely on other people, a judge or professional conservatorship or whoever gets appointed to work with you. If in fact you get someone else appointed to work with you, um, it's not, they're not in charge. Okay, it also encourages understanding in relationships. It encourages everyone to really get to know who you are and speak up with you and for you. Okay, we'll go on to the next one.
Now we're going to talk about preparing for supported decision making through education and talking about building critical thinking skills. And so the big thing we want to emphasize is starting early. A lot of times the conversation isn't brought up to you about conservatorship or alternatives like supported decision making until they're in this transition age, right? Right when they're about to turn 18. And at that point, we still need to build on those skills. So it's important to build them as early as possible. And how do you begin early? It's involving them in small decisions, right? Starting out with small decisions. So things like maybe they're going to decide what to eat today. And maybe they don't verbalize it, but maybe it's showing them two options and letting them pick, right? Which snack do you want right now? Having them pick. Maybe it's, I've heard some families talk about using Post-it notes, right? Maybe they aren't going to communicate reasons why, but they have Post-it notes of different options they have, and they can move them around and they can rank them. Just getting them involved in small decisions in the beginning. I always think about this period before they turn 18. It's a trial run. It's a practice. It's time to practice, and it's a place where they can practice decisions safely, right? And so continuing to
And
involve
practice mistakes
and yeah, and
You got
practicing.
to make mistakes.
I know one thing that parents have shared before, it's like their child wants to stay up, whether it's they're reading a book or they're playing a video game or something. They want to stay up really, really late. And then but the next morning they have class really early in the morning, a class that they really enjoy. And so letting them make that mistake sometimes. You stayed up too late. Now you're having trouble in the morning, right? And it's learning from those mistakes. When we don't allow them to make those mistakes, they don't have that dignity of risk, right? All of us who make decisions are allowed some level of risk, and allowing them to know that it's okay to make the wrong choice sometimes. It's what do we learn from it? And how do we become better at making these decisions? Another great place to practice it is involving them in their IEPs and building towards student-led IEPs and students making their own goals for communication as well as in the school place, right? And it begins with just having them in the room and letting them be a part of that conversation. As we were talking about earlier, a lot of times self-advocates share that even though they're in the room, they don't feel a part of the conversation because people are not giving them time to process, giving them time to respond. And so it begins early on by allowing them to be at these IEPs and to lead these conversations. And it's really all about practicing it beforehand, right? And it's about that preparation. Um, we need to prep our students beforehand, say, we're going to be attending this IEP meeting. These are some questions that they may be asking. They're going to be talking about what goals do you have and preparing them for it so they don't feel like they're being put on the spot at the meeting. This also happens at a doctor's office, right? Sometimes it's important to prepare beforehand to talk through, we're going to the doctor tomorrow. Do you have any questions for them? This is what a visit's going to look like, and really preparing them beforehand so they're not overwhelmed there. And then again, just talking about transitioning into adulthood, while they're young, it's this time for them to practice and for them to continue building those skills into adulthood to make larger decisions and to see how their support changes and to learn about how they want their support, right? Maybe it's they want their support by someone helping them research their options and explaining it to them. Maybe it's, I want my support people to help me find a video and just let me watch the video so I can understand what's going on. Maybe it's let's model it, right? If it's at a dentist, I need you to model it on something else for me before we do it on myself. And so this time period is a great time for them to practice how and when they want to receive support.
I think before we go to this next one, I wanted to add to that the critical thinking skills, it's evaluating things, right? So you want to teach a person and empower a person to be evaluating scenarios or likes and dislikes or situations. And so that's going to take follow-up, right? And one that I use a lot is like a rating scale. You might have a rating scale of 1 to 5. And this could be for any level of communicator. You just have 1 through 5, right? And you can say, okay, so how did you like going to that park, okay, or that concert? And they say, oh, that was a 4. Okay, great. And then everybody goes around that went and gives their rating. Okay, great. Now we have that established. Maybe next time we then go to the concert because you got a 4 out of it, out of 1 to 5. And you go to this other concert and it's different kind of music. You say, so how'd you like that concert? And the person says, oh, that was a 2. You say, wow, you changed your mind. I thought you liked concerts. And then you can start getting in a conversation. Okay, did you like did you like this concert less because it was, and start using your prior knowledge. What was it? It was too loud. It was lots of lights going on. Think about what would be and see if they can answer that question. But you're helping the person see that we don't just make questions. I don't just know the answers to these things. I think it through, right? And so you're helping the person see that that's what critical thinking is. We think it through. We come back, we revisit, we reevaluate. And so giving those kinds of opportunities beyond basic wants and needs for choices is so important for you all, I think, especially as family members, to feel confident that your person can be more active in this decision making, in their supported decision making life. You have to have those experiences to know that they got this, I have a son who, when he's a physical movement kind of a guy, right? And so when he was 2 years old, he was climbing on things, and 3 years old, he's climbing on apparatuses that other people in parks would be nervous about. But I knew that he knew what his body was doing because I'd seen all the way he'd used his body on these different apparatuses and things. And so I didn't have that apprehension about, oh my God, why is she letting that little kid up there? He knows what to do in those kinds of scenarios. But that was through experiences. Mind you, sometimes he would fall and I would say, okay, that one's not a good one, but this one is okay. And I developed those boundaries and that definition of what was a good idea and what was not going to be necessarily a good idea. And that's what I was using my critical thinking skills for him as a little guy, right? So knowing and understanding that your person can do these different things in different situations is going to give you confidence in them. Okay, next scenario.
And I wanted to add too, and I know it's hard, especially for us parents, like to see our children fail. But for me, all these years of getting related services, right, like PTOT, speech, ABA, a lot of that, if we don't give them, you know, that opportunity to exercise it, it's almost like, why are we doing all these skill building things, right?
Mhm.
And I've had to, like, you know, experience it where, like, if my daughter pretty much says she doesn't want it, like, I really have to respect that, even though I know that that was a poor decision.
And then later on, you can come back to it and go, you know
Yeah.
what? That was what I was talking about when I asked you if you want to do this versus
Yes.
this. And then you
Yes.
compare it. And that's how
Yes.
we all learn.
Mhm.
That is neurologically how your brain works. See, we're not making this up as a social construct. It is how your
Mhm.
brain works. Okay?
Mhm.
And
Yes.
everybody's brain works that way. So yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. Yeah. Okay. So this next scenario is an individual with limited speech, primarily discusses favorite videos or expresses basic wants and needs without a reliable yes no. Supported decision making can still be effectively implemented. And this is the approach that can help promote that. So let's look at that scenario. All right. Um, okay. Let's see. You've got, again, your team, family members, teachers, support workers, your speech and language pathologists, your advocates, your behavior therapists. Again, not a paid behavior therapist or a paid speech pathologist because you paid them to be on the team, but they happen, you know them because of a paid experience, okay? It's not that you're paying them to be on the team, it's that you know them, this is how you met them, all right? So this team of people could be neighbors, could be family friends, could be classmates. I remember when I would do person-centered planning in a classroom for kids, and that was so much fun because you could have any kind of communicator go into a classroom of peers and be a part of that class. And if you walk in and you ask those friends, how does so-and-so communicate with you? They got tons of ideas. All right, those are important things to note, and those are people who are connecting with your individual. I was doing an evaluation one day, and the little brother came with him. And so he was very excited about being there. And so I said, "Hey, how do you talk with Stephen?" And he just lit up and he told me all about how he saw his brother could communicate. That was really valuable. His brother, this little brother, understands how his brother communicates. He's going to be a great support and decision making partner because he gets his brother. Okay, doesn't mean that all brothers get you, but that's the kind of thing you're looking for. Okay, so that's your team. Next slide.
So for in this case, we're talking still about inclusion of the individual, right? And so we want to continue talking about structured choices. And that can be like examples Darlene and I mentioned earlier about giving them different to rank, right? It's a very structured way for them to communicate their choices, ranking these three options that you have, right? Or and then allowing them to understand what each option means. And so explaining them in terms that they'll understand. When we talk about enhanced communication training, this is just an observational data. It's talking about observing how they communicate and seeing as maybe like it was like what Shirley mentioned earlier, right? They're saying yes, but then they'll push the plate away. And so really looking and understanding those cues that they may have for possibly unreliable communication as well.
Okay, let's go to the next slide because we're running out of time.
And then continuing about the decision-making process, it's collaborative meetings, talking with a team to talk about what you're noticing and how they communicate. And the biggest thing is trial and error, that it's not a one size fits all of this exact strategy is going to work for them. And that's how they're going to communicate. And that's how they're going to communicate forever, right? It's a trial and error. Maybe ranking doesn't work. Maybe we need something more physical. Maybe we need to show more images. We need to show more videos. Maybe we do something else. And so it's all about trial and error, and then documenting how they react to these different communication strategies as well.
And then you would be the person, possibly, you team people, might be the person saying the words to the group, to the receiver of the information, the doctor, the teacher, whoever they're advocating with. But you're saying it because you collaborated with the person and they've identified that they want you to be your spokesperson. Okay, I want to make sure we get into the nuts and bolts of the stuff. And so Vivian's going to jump us in forward here to the supports. Let's do that, Vivian, because the why was kind of the same as before.
Yeah, so again, advocating for supported decision making. We talked about, gave some examples in the medical sense. It's giving them options for preferences for care and encouraging partnerships with communication and medical teams, right? And so I'm going to show this example here, and we'll put a link to the sheet as well. This is our support tip sheet, and talking about how to work with medical professionals while using supported decision making, how to provide different types of accommodations, how to give information to them, right? Maybe it's role playing with different visuals, and understanding that. And that kind of builds into our healthcare passport here, which, like we mentioned earlier, it says things like, if I'm in pain, I'm going to show it by how, right? Maybe I'm going to, maybe I'm going to really hit my feet. If I get upset at a situation, how am I going to react? It's also important to note things on your healthcare passport, things like maybe an aversion to touch. Maybe you don't like being touched, and you need to communicate that with your medical provider beforehand, so that you know the best strategies there, right? Or maybe it's preparing for these visits beforehand at home. Hey, I'm going to model this, what's going to happen at the doctor's office tomorrow at home, so that they feel safe and feel supported.
Okay, that's me. I was, okay, I was writing a message to everybody, but we'll do it later. Okay, education and advocacy. You want your persons to start getting involved in their lives through their IEPs. That's the first thing that happens typically. So in making sure that the person can be there, and you don't have to be in the whole meeting. At first, you might not want to. You might just want to stop in and say hello to everybody. And then the next time, but if you go home and you talk with your person about the meeting afterwards, then, okay, that's what's happening. Okay, then next time you have a meeting, they might stay a little bit longer. And I encourage you not to sell people short, which I know we always tend to do, especially as concerned parties. But I have an individual that I've worked with for years, and he's a very dysregulated person most of the day. And he wanted to come to his IEP meeting, and we're like, oh, that's going to be interesting, because he's very dysregulated. There's 16 people in this meeting, and I don't know what's going to happen, right? He came and stayed in his meeting for 45 minutes because we adjusted the space for him and all of that. So he got to be a part of his meeting, and we made sure that he was not talked about, but he was talked with and he shared. So all of us were blown away. No one expected him to be successful at it. We just thought we were giving him an opportunity and he was going to leave. And then he came to the next meeting, and now that's what he does. So we want to start, building up that opportunity to be a part of your meetings, because that's where you're advocating, right? And you might have, you can start having a school-based SDM team. So maybe that part of your team is your school people that help you. Again, you're sending the message that teacher people, he needs to know, or she needs to know what the goals are. She's a part of how we're working on the goals. Okay, it's not just the thing you do at 10:15.
this person's a part of it. So those are that's kind, you don't have to have, your whole team doesn't have to go to every single decision-making activity. Okay. So you'll pick and choose different people to be different pieces, important pieces of your life. All right, let's go to the next slide. Financial, am I doing financial? Sorry. Let me see, I am, okay, financial. Okay, this is a big deal for many of us because we get worried that people are going to take money or spend money of our individuals. So this might be somewhere where you want to have a use of our use of a SDM, maybe a power of attorney agreement about who's really the last say or the person in charge of the finances. That is all part of SDM. So because you're an SDM doesn't mean there's no strings attached, right? Using power, you can use power of attorney to say mom or dad or sister or brother or grandma or aunt or teacher person has power of attorney for my finances, okay, for the finances. And that is something that you get notarized and it is official. And if that person was to move away and they said, you know what, I'm not going to be around very often because I'm moving 3 states away, then you might want to get a different person, but you can. There's flexibility in that. So we have a structured financial planning tool. It's, you know, we have ways to safeguard against, and it doesn't safeguard, it isn't 100% safety. Something could happen, but you have recourse, okay? And you, again, I would say that using power of attorney is something to definitely consider in the finances area. Life-based communication.
Finally, we want to just kind of end off with talking about a life-based in communication while advocating and for using supported decision-making. A big thing is expect participation, right? Encouraging them to participate in any way that they want to. Again, maybe that's by pointing at their different options. Maybe it's through ranking things, right? But encouraging them to stay participated in their choices because it allows them to be a part of their life, to be making decisions about their life. And that is a really empowering feeling, and to be able to set goals for themselves outside of just choosing about basic wants and needs. Having an identified means of communication, like Darlene was mentioning earlier, thinking and building your communication system. Having your support people with you. These are the people that are going to help you understand all of your decisions, right? But that's all based in knowing how and understanding how they like to communicate and how they receive information as well. And a big thing we've been talking about, and Shirley even mentioned, and I saw people leaving notes in the chat as well, is letting mistakes happen and learning from them and building upon those skills so that we can continue to become better decision makers. And finally, knowing what support looks like for you, right? There's lots of ways people can support you. Maybe in some avenues right now, support can mean substitute decision making where they're going to make the decisions for you. But maybe support later on means they're just going to help advise in different situations, right? Maybe that for finances, it means regular meetings about your budget. Maybe support can look like researching your options and explaining it to you in terms that you'll understand.
So I think, I was just thinking about the importance of, Tommy wrote in here, you know, she's asking about what are the ways to prepare for the possibility of people denying you that this is a real thing. You know, people saying, I've never heard of it so before. I don't think this is how we do it here, right? And I think I would personally use the words AB 1663, because then they're gonna go, oh, I might not know what that is, but it sounds very official. I better figure that out, you know, and I better listen to you. But it's also about preparing people that this is how we do things. This is how we practice decision making in our family, and this is how our person advocates for himself, prior to these different meetings that you might have with a banker or a college team or a doctor or something like that. So yes, in emergency situations, it's going to be a little bit tougher. I would say you come in prepared. You come in with your documentation. You come in, maybe you have a printout or you have it on ready to go on your phone. Here's AB 1663 where it says supported decision making. Here's my paperwork, supported decision making. So as a community, the reality is this is new. So if you're like Shirley, you were talking about how people were, starting to mention about conservatorship in your meetings and such because of Kaylana's age. So if that's when you start talking about the fact that, well, we've been looking into, or I've been learning about supported decision making, they may not know what you're talking about. And then you got to educate them. And that's just what we have to do right now. That's why all of us are doing all of this kind of training and awareness building, because most people don't know what it is. But if we don't start talking about it and start sharing about it, that's going to stay the same. So we need to change that up a little bit.
And so in the chat, I added in a couple of documents. And so there's the communication profile template that Darlene mentioned earlier, as well as a link to our supported decision-making parent handbook, as well as I just uploaded a supported decision-making introduction for professionals. So that will provide a great introduction to a doctor, a teacher who might have some hesitation about this just because it's so new, right? The law was signed in 2022 and only became in effect in 2023. And so this here will link to the different parts of the law that explains the legality of supported decision making.
And William added into his comments here, my parents may rephrase a statement or question for me to respond, so I'm involved in a decision. That is a great tool, William, just for all of us to help the person be more actively involved. And if you think as a support person that your person isn't understanding you or isn't understanding the conversation, it's totally reasonable to ask that individual, do you think you're understanding this? What do you think he says what do you think he means when he says this, right? And then start doing the checks and balances. You don't have to make these decisions right, except for the hospitals maybe. But most situations, you're not making these decisions right away. You got to take time to process it, and that's totally fine. Again, not dire straits like the hospital, but other situations, I think that's important. Shirley, we got 5 minutes, but Shirley, I wanted to give you an opportunity to express some of your thoughts before we get done.
As we go through this question and answers as well, before people have to leave, I'm going to launch our post-training survey as well. So if you can continue to fill those out as we continue to have this conversation.
Thanks. Okay, go Shirley. Oops, we can't hear you. Sorry.
I had those reservations about the officialness of the SDM, right? So it was also suggested to have a power of attorney document. That would be helpful.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you could be walking into a meeting with a power of attorney, or you could be walking into a meeting with conservatorship. Both those documents, many people take as official, right? I mean, people usually take those official.
And you could always
that they.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, is it easier to change the power of attorneys than the conservatorship,
yes.
Right?
That's what I was saying. The difference is that with conservatorship, it's a big deal to get into it, and it's an even bigger deal to get out of it and change it. With power of attorney, it's just change the power of attorney. You make a decision as a team, you go to your notary, and you change your power of attorney. If you have to have sometimes with powers of attorney for medical things, it might be a situation where you need to have a doctor validating that this person isn't able to make decisions without support. So then you might have to have a doctor's signature. But again, you can change that up whenever you need to. Just get another doctor's signature. Whereas in conservatorship, it's the court really is deciding when changes are made, what those changes will be. And Vivian and I were talking about this. The biggest thing that comes up, this isn't a positive thing, it's a hard thing, is when there's conservatorship and then there's a divorce in the family. And more times than I'd like to say, that has become a part of the divorce agreement, and it oftentimes does not go well. So, not that anybody's foreseeing that they want to get a divorce, or are planning to get a divorce, but that's a time when a judge is involved in your life. And the judge may say, you know what, you guys, you can't come to a conclusion. I'm going to assign a professional conservator.
Hey, Darlene, I just want to
Yeah.
throw you real quick because we have 2 minutes and it's important for Vivian to get to answer. The most recent question says, what about individuals who are already conserved? How can we get help dissolving in favor of using SDM?
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, so that process begins with petitioning, or when you have the investigators come telling them that you are interested in dissolving your conservatorship, right? And so because of AB 1663, it has become a little bit easier to dissolve a conservatorship when both the conservator and this conservatee both want it dissolved. And so then you file a petition at your courts that you want to dissolve the conservatorship, and you'll have to prove why, right? Why do they, now you basically have to prove decision-making capacity, and how you prove that is through supported decision-making. So in this case, you would need to create a supported decision-making agreement, and for them to talk about how they use supported decision-making to make these choices, right? Who are their supporters? Where do their supporters help them? We've had a case recently that they told us that they were able to get it dissolved in favor of conservatorship. They created videos talking about how they use supported decision-making in their life and talking about why conservatorship is not necessary anymore.
Yep. So I want to, first of all, I want to thank Shirley. Thank you for being our voice of family. This was she's a newbie to these thoughts, and so I thought her ideas would be fresh. So thank you for joining us. I want to thank Vivian for co-doing this with me, because I think it's such an important topic, and I think we have to be able to respond to all the different scenarios that can come up. In communication and advocacy is such a big deal for me, for communicators. And I want to thank William and Dan for joining. Thank you, William, and for your words of wisdom, as always. William's putting together, he's on a team that's putting together videos for supported decision-making. So we'll be telling you when those things are ready to be seen. But he's one of the actors and creators of some supported decision-making videos for us, and for the state, rather. So thank you for that. And then I want to tell you that next month is going to be exciting, because we're going to have one of our persons that follows us here is Jeremy Cecil Kira. And through Jeremy, he's an artist in San Diego who uses augmented communication. He's introduced me to a man named Gil, who works for, I think it's PathPoint in Santa Barbara area, that is an AT specialist and looks at some really, especially Apple systems. So he comes up with some really great ideas. He's the kind of guy that you want to pick his brain. So Gil's going to be speaking with us in April. So I hope you can join us for that. I'm very excited to hear all he has to say. He's a wealth of information. So join us for that. And thank you all. Thank you, Spanish interpreters, for joining us. And with that, we're going to close out. Thanks, Michaela.
Thank you.